Sure.
So great, thanks. So how about Mark? How about can we get people's video, and can we get people open the floor now so people can have a chance to? I mean, look at Judy Davis is on.
Yeah.
They're just Barbara Gindhart is on, whose aunt was one of those great Grail women, Mary Gindhart. There are lots of people on. Gail Raschuti is with us. Diane New, I remember her.
Yeah.
Jennifer Reisinger herself is on. So Diane Raposo from the BVM Sisters is on. So please, if we could open it to conversation, let's do it.
So I'm a little puzzled why people can't. People should be invited to open up their video.
This may help you. This is Jennifer. Is that I was given my audio button, but I wasn't given a video button. This is on the bottom row of Zoom, and so I have my audio button, and I can mute it or unmute it, and then but I don't have the corresponding video button. So that might help Isaiah.
William, per usual, Jennifer Reisinger, would you like to say a little word in the meantime about your upcoming presentation with us? I just happen to have your book here, Schooling the Nation. Just happen to have Schooling the Nation, the Success of the Canterbury Academy for Black Women. So you will be our next speaker. And Charlotte, you may be interested in tuning in.
Yeah.
Just a very quick word, Jennifer.
Sure. This involves a controversy in the state of Connecticut that was part of the abolition movement in 1833. A white school teacher who had admitted one Black student to her class when she received opposition from the white parents in the neighborhood decided to change her academy for Black women only. This was inspired by other Black women who had vetted her to make sure that she was going to be a true ally. And so the usefulness of the book right now is in enabling us to see how politics moves outside of the voting booth, which is something that I think Mary and Charlotte, you brought out so beautifully from your own background and what it meant as women to be coming out and doing that in an academic and intellectual place where you could be thinking about what you were doing. It wasn't only about who you were going to vote for in the next election.
Right.
So, that's
we're looking forward to that, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it will be on March the 12th, and we will be right here at the same time, same station.
I just want to say I found it very meaningful, Charlotte, the slogan from the women living under Muslim laws, "The violence is not our culture," both because of its simplicity, because of the kind of built-in dialectic tension of it, because the only response that someone who is opposed to that could give is a violent response.
Right. Yeah.
So it has a kind of jujitsu-like quality that I find quite impressive. And yes, it's not the slogan that would naturally occur in an American context, but
yeah,
that was quite a gem. And I really appreciate the globalization of the problem. We are not alone in having a right-wing, narrowly chauvinistic dictator wannabe.
Right.
Yeah, I want to turn to Celeste Berry, who's just put in the chat that she has to jump off, but wanted to mention Lesbian Global working to educate Western LGBT women about lesbians working around the world. Charlotte, I'm sure you know that group, and I'm sure you know Celeste Berry, one of the great leaders in these movements, who started the workplace issues group, Out and Equal.
Yes. Celeste.
There's Celeste.
How we see you.
Out and Equal.
Right.
Celeste Berry is all over the world. Go ahead, Celeste.
That was fabulous, Charlotte and Mary. It was really helpful to hear this historical perspective. And I'm working with a couple of women in the Bay Area to help to support things like the European Central Asia lesbian community that works in Europe and Central Asia, but they're doing much more global work. And they're supporting these tiny little lesbian communities in the Middle East and Asia and all over the world, and sometimes can need like $5,000 a year to have programs where they're
Yeah.
saving women's lives, essentially. So we're trying to educate people about what lesbians are going through worldwide, but also, trying to raise money for them as well. So a lot of the work that you've done is we're building on that and continuing that.
That's great. I recently met with the lesbian women in Kazakhstan who were trying to put on the European National Conference. And so I know exactly what you're talking about and how important they are. And they did manage to have something of a conference, although not what they had hoped for. But I think you're making a really important point, which is there are so many groups around the world who have had either partial or some access to funding, either through USAID or through the Dutch government, which has just cut off millions of dollars in funding to women's rights groups because of the right-wing turn in the Dutch government, in the Swedish government. The funding for efforts that trickle down to the Kazakhstan small lesbian groups like that is so endangered. So I think it's very important. If we can't do, and I know those of us who are older may not be able to do as much of the activism, but we can support and find ways to support groups not only in the US, but Australia and groups that support women around the world in keeping their activism going, is certainly, and it's more important than ever that we put some money into those kinds of things. So, and make relationships with them in the process and learn what they're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Who's next?
Perhaps if you could raise your hand, if you'd like to speak, if you want to do more than just listen, if you could raise your hand, then Mary or I could call on you. You could just raise your...
Rosemary Ganley will be next.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to pay tribute to you, Charlotte. I think I saw you in Beijing in 1995.
Probably, yes.
Yes.
I was there. Yeah.
And I talked Peggy Antrobus into spending some months in my Canadian city.
Oh, great.
So and she's an admirer of yours. And I'm so impressed with your grasp of the Canadian mood, which is we're shocked and frightened and determined to carve a way. And I just want to mention that we have a very promising political leader stepping forward. His name is Mark Carney, and he's from a small rural northern town. And he was chairman of the Bank of England during Brexit. So we think he can handle whatever is coming for him. The other point I was really appreciated, and I'm a friend of Mary's, and Mary brought me a gift last time she came, and it was your book, Passionate Politics. I'm 88, Charlotte.
Right.
And I'm full of vim and vigor for this struggle because it's global. You pointed that out. It's global, it's unstoppable. And the arc of the moral universe is going to return to more progressive ways.
Great. Well, I think it can, and I hope we're all there for it. And I just want to say that I'm good friends with Carolyn McCaskey, who used to work at the UN and is Canadian, and she just talked to me about all those political options. So you can credit Carolyn and my friendship with her for my knowledge of what sounds like the right scene in Canada. So thank you. Right.
Yes.
Well, and Rosemary Ganley, Dr. Rosemary Ganley for her honorary doctorate last year, and this year was inducted in the Order of Canada. So we are in the company of royalty here. But this is so important that we have these kinds of connections because Rosemary Ganley is a major.
So I'm an influencer.
That's right.
That's right. And so are all of you.
Right.
Mark, go ahead. Can you find someone else there that you want to spotlight?
I can't see that someone else would like to speak, and who wants to listen. If someone wants to just sort of raise a hand or unmute and speak up, Libby, go for it, Libby, yay.
Okay, I have many questions, but mostly appreciation for you, Charlotte. I live in Denver. Had to distance myself from my Catholicism because I couldn't find any religious inspiration there, and was part of the Big Mama Rag, which is the West version of Off Our Back publication. Jackie St. Joan was on the earlier call but had to leave, and a lot of my friends here in Denver hold you in great high regard. I did not know about your religious background. Somehow I missed that when I was stiff-arming religion altogether back in the day. But then I found my way to some associations with some of the progressive nuns in our country, and it was some sort of a conversion process. But I want to know if you have any ideas how to bring back the golden rule and the beatitude to this so-called Christian nation.
Well, that's a pretty big challenge, but I just want to say that I think that many of us who left the church are now looking to progressive religious organizations to be a significant force in this conversation. And the golden rule, I mean, I mentioned the slogan of the church that I'm affiliated with after at least 40 years of not having any religious affiliation is love, period, which I think is the golden rule, and is also very much interested in bringing those core principles that actually I think most religions were founded around decent human desires and needs and ideas about how to live with one another, but they all got drawn into the mostly patriarchal cultures of their time and the power struggles and the institutional survival that goes with that. So that's one reason someone else mentioned the slogan, violence is not my culture, is not our culture. It's not our culture was so powerful because it was defying who defines culture as well as who defines the religion. So I think it's important to bring all of our voices in as alternative ways of thinking about culture and religion.
Thank you. Gail, did you want to speak? And then maybe Barbara, Genhart, Gail, if you'd like to say something, you can unmute.
And people who are not speaking, if you could mute, that will help also to keep echoes away and keep a clear line. So if you're not speaking, just hit.
Thank you, Mark. And Mary and Charlotte, thank you so much for this rich past hour. Charlotte, you addressed in part one of the earlier questions about how to live in this political culture right now. But I keep thinking, I guess I watch too much news. But given that love sums it up and is our culture, how though do we address the the tidal wave of lies that I think there are so many lies, it's meant to confuse us, it's meant to overwhelm us. And personally, how do you overcome the effect of all the lying in your own spirituality? And then politically, what would you suggest we do to counteract all of that?
Shoot, tough questions. I mean, I think that on the personal level, yes, I don't listen to I'm in Peru. It enables me, I've been in Peru since January 1st. It enables me to get a little distance from the barrage of news, from the barrage of, I was listening to CNN and MSNBC, and there would be nights when you just like go to bed feeling overwhelmed by all that's happening. So I think it is important to choose carefully how much of the news we want to hear and how. I read much more of The Guardian rather than US news sources to give me at least a little distance from the US myopic news opinions, and still get a lot of coverage of the US. But, it's very hard. I think we have to choose carefully ways to keep ourselves sane while still getting the information we need in terms of the news, and not listen, as I often did in the past, even before I came here, to 4 hours, of being hit in the head with it all. But in terms of the spiritual practice, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to also watch for things that are positive and support them, whether that's a group meeting in our own town or something you read about somewhere else that you can either send money to support, or you can just pass on the ideas that come from that, like I just did with the violence is not our culture. Ultimately, I can't say what anybody should do because we all live in different connected spheres, but I think it is a time when we have to also take care of ourselves. This is going to be probably 4 years. I don't, J.D. Vance is not a preferable target in my mind to have as president. So I don't have very much hope for the removal of Trump, even if it should happen, bringing us any relief. So politically, yes, maybe in 2 years we'll get, a different scene in Washington, and that we should make happen. But there's so many other things, someone said it, that we need to be doing. It's not just about our vote. Sometimes I think we get caught in that. It's the ways in which we deal in our neighborhood. We create conversations, we engage, either globally or locally. It's kind of just engaging in what can be done and in thinking and reading things that make us feel hopeful. I do look for news that is something that somebody's gotten done. I do look to the new president of Mexico as a kind of fresh voice for how to deal with Trump, when clearly she has to deal with him. She can't just alienate him. I think she's really an interesting woman in politics trying to do this. I mean, to me, that's worth watching. And just trying to find the things that will make me think differently, maybe some news from some other part of the world, the things I've mentioned, or maybe somebody that will just help me feel, if hope is my practice, then I have to find ways that I can be more hopeful in my daily life and what I expose myself to.
And you were
Thank you,
the
Gail. Thank you,
Charlotte,
Gail.
you and your Furies were among the people who understood early on in feminism that music and literature and fun and the women's concerts, the things that people really enjoy. This is why the takeover of the Kennedy Center is such a terrible moment in our history, because for someone who's never been in it to now become the president of it, and you can only imagine what that means in terms of the level of popular entertainment, but still that we can choose and create and put our resources into the music and the literature and the dance and so forth that really reflect a variety of cultures is so important. I think that's just critical.
I think Barbara Ginhart would like to speak up. Yeah,
well,
Barbara?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say it was a very inspirational conversation. And Charlotte, I feel very grateful to be in your presence, that you met my aunt. I don't know exactly how, Mary Ginhart, who was very involved with the Commission on the Status of Women, who was in Beijing.
Right.
And I found your card when I was going through her effects. She died a couple of years ago. And, when I'm going to CSW, and for all of the work that you've done, I feel what I've read is that there are a lot of global feminists across the United States who are very much in solidarity. What do you think that we can learn from them in terms of organizing? I'm 61, and I feel like I thought living through Reagan was bad, but I like this whole idea of the rise of American fascism in ways that I feel like that it's just a reality that lots of women around the globe have lived through. So I feel like, what are your thoughts? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, it's a huge question, but
Yeah.
I mean, there are organizations and publications. I mean, simple things like Global Fund for Women. Not only can one give money to an organization like that, but you can read they've run a lot of reports on what women in other countries are doing. The Estrella Lesbian Foundation, in terms of lesbian and LGBTQ women, they've done a lot of work internationally, and they're also giving voice to and talking about
Oh, it's a blanket.
what those are doing. The Urgent Action Fund, which I was until recently on the board, that gives money for women in crisis situations. They're all of these organizations, the women's funding networks, that there are local as well as global women's funds. I think that's a good place to just start paying attention to what's being talked about, and maybe you start to find one that interests you and you follow that particular one. But we do have in the US, much more so than we did 20, 30 years ago, a globally connected world of women. I think the women's funding networks and the urgent action funds are one of the easiest ways to start finding out about that and plugging into it.
Charlotte, can you mention what you're coming? I know you're coming back to New York in March. Can you mention what's happening at the UN and the celebration of the Beijing anniversary?
Sure. I mean, Barbara just mentioned it, but let me be explicit. The UN is having the Commission on the Status of Women, which is its annual meeting on women's rights, which always happens at this time in March. This year, the 2 middle weeks of March, will be a review of the Beijing Platform for Action from 1995. And so it will be a time in the UN where governments are discussing that, but most of us who don't spend our time in governments will also be engaging in non-governmental alternative events that will be held all over New York. And you can get those off of the UN Women website. You can ask for the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. They haven't put up the full calendar yet, but if any of you have access to New York, many of those events are also going to be online. And I think what will happen, the official UN part, of which I will spend very little time, will probably try to pass a declaration, and the US has already declared that it's starting with its stance that there are only two genders. The US statement for the Beijing +30 review already came out, and its primary focus was there are only two genders, and therefore all of this rest of this stuff is oppressing women, that they're going to defend women's understanding that there are only two genders, basically. So the US part will be pretty bad, and I don't think there's much you can do about it. But there will be very lively events all over town at the same time, run by various non-governmental organizations. And for example, the Association for Women's Rights and Development, AWID, has a website, AWID, www.awid.com, that you can go on and get a calendar of a lot of these things, as does the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. I'm on a couple of panels talking about what was important at Beijing and what does it mean now? How can we, build on that, whether the governments do or not? So it will be a time to reaffirm that we have a global women's movement, and that there are many women's organizations working to fulfill the ideas that we put forth in Beijing on the 30th anniversary.
Good.
And I'm sure that you and others will be taking into account women, non-binary people, women identified, trans women. I mean, all of that is so important now, 50 years later, for us to grapple with and to embrace. And so I think that'll be a great teaching opportunity in New York.
Yes.
I was wondering, Diane New, would you like to say something? Or would you please join us here? If you can unmute, we can hear from you. And if anyone else, we want to wrap up here in a couple of minutes. If anyone else wants to speak, let us know. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Mark, and especially thank you, Mary and Charlotte. You know, one of the things that I heard was choose the practice of hope. And I think having the two of you in conversation today, the way that you chose to interact with one another is one of the most hopeful things for me of today. You know, we carry all of what this danger in our universe is on our shoulders and on our backs. And when I see people like the two of you who have committed your lives in so many incredible ways, just sit down and talk about it together and share it with us. That is the sign of hope for me. May this happen more and more. And Mark, thank you so much for making it possible.
All right. And again, thank you, Mary and Diane and Water, for this collaboration. This is a Mary and I, this came up in conversation between us months ago. What could we do around this? And so it really happened. Thank you so much, Mary and Diane and Water, and Charlotte. Just thank you for being here. I have to say, I'm almost speak up. A few months back, I happened to be looking through our email list, and I saw that Charlotte Bunch opened our e-newsletter. Charlotte Bunch was reading our e-newsletter. And I went, I can't believe it. Charlotte Bunch is reading our, so that got me thinking about how we might do this. So Charlotte, you've been just a pioneer and someone whom I've had great respect for over so many decades. And so just thank you for sharing some of this. Mary, would you like to say anything to close?
I'd simply say thank you to everyone who's been with us, and especially to our colleagues at LGBT RAN. I think you folks are doing something that nobody else is doing that needs to be done. I'm glad Charlotte is going to have an entry there, or has an entry there. We'll put it in the notes. We'll be sending out notes and the video of this, and included will be a link to your bio, Charlotte. And thank you to our colleagues there, and thank you to my colleagues here at Water, Wed and Magdalena and Diane, and so glad that we were able to do this. And hopefully, Mark, as you and I and others put our heads together, there will be other opportunities to collaborate. So
we'll do this again. Great.
The collaboration.
Welcome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
I want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you also, Mark and Mary, for making this happen, because I was reading your newsletter. I do, not every month, but I do look through the various things that come online, and they are part of my hopeful vocabulary of looking for hope. So I was delighted, and I particularly was delighted. I've known Mary for a very long time. I haven't known you personally, but I know the work of LGBT RAN. The initials are not yet fully on my tongue, but I think bringing these two together was fabulous. So thank you for inviting me to be to do that. Right.
Thank you. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.